is the founder of Simplero. We're behind the scenes on the Run With It podcast. You're going to see the unedited version of the podcast live here right now. If you'd like to comment, have any questions, feel free to do so. If you want to hear the polished version of it, the fully produced one, you can find that by subscribing to Run With It on your podcast player of choice. Would appreciate you doing so and leaving a review for us. With that being said, you guys ready to get into the episode?
I'm ready.
Yeah, totally.
All right.
Only leave a review if it's going to be a 5-star review, though, right?
That's right.
That's right.
Ethan, how you doing, man?
I'm good. I'm excited to talk about this idea. We've only had a few. Before we
get in the idea, I've got an axe to grind with you that I got to bring up here.
Oh shoot, man!
On one of the,
Do you want me to grind the axe for you?
Yeah, you're gonna have to do this. So, Calvin, I apologize that you got to listen to this. Ethan and I fight all the time, and it's just it's part of the relationship. Ethan, you brought up this service for finding unclaimed money a couple of weeks back, a couple episodes. I think it was with Ryan Kuhn. Yeah. And I submitted that, and you're talking all about how much money you can save. And, now I'm $2,000 in the hole as a result of your unclaimed money suggestion. So thank you very much for that. Louisiana. I mean, it's not all bad. It's actually money that.
Well, I have to say that our
ballooned.
Our
had
podcast,
you not done that?
Our podcast producer Ari did do the same thing, and she did get money back. And
maybe it's a wash for the Run With It team overall.
It's a wash for the Run With It team overall. But anyways, for anybody out there, I'm still confident in making this suggestion. You can find on every state in the United States, they have an unclaimed money website where you can go and you just search the database, and it'll say, hey, you got like $100 here or something from some utility company, and you just put your info in and they send you a check. I mean, it's your money anyways.
Or you send the state of Louisiana $2,000 for for some.
Hey, it's not my fault that you had an outstanding $2,000 that you owed.
Why couldn't they find me?
They just found out where you lived.
Exactly.
So it goes both ways.
I guess so. I mean, I got a letter afterward. It was shoot. Yeah.
But they sell it as like unclaimed money, right? Like they don't sell it as like, hey, you check if you owe us money.
I mean, that's what Ethan sold it to be like.
Chris is the first person that I've heard that it actually backfired like that.
Honestly, I mean, I'm saying this, but I am grateful for it because it was some tax revision. I had to update my federal tax, and they automatically
probably had some penalties that were accruing.
Yeah,
right?
So then there's a penalties and all the late fees, and I just paid it. Anyway, so now that axe has been ground down, we've got Calvin Corelli here on the podcast. He is the founder of Simplero, multi-million-dollar business that helps info educators and business owners to create their platform, the website, everything associated with that. We'll talk about that a little bit more in the episode. But Ethan, you want to tell us a little bit about the idea that Calvin is bringing to us?
Yeah, I'll just say, he basically wants to help the homeless. And I know he lives in New York there, in Brooklyn area, especially where I used to live. And I can imagine like why, when, how he came up with this idea that he wants to create some sort of organization, nonprofit, for-profit, whatever, around helping homeless people. I just know you see him, on the subway, on the streets. It's something that some people almost get inured to in New York City. Is this where you came up with this idea? Was it, it's just kind of got off the subway the other day and said, hey, maybe I could help?
Yeah. I mean, not just New York, but also, I was just in Austin last week. I mean, places with warmer climate tends to, be a little more accommodating for homeless people, but yeah, all over, man. And I'm from Denmark. And there are actually the government does a fairly good job there of helping homeless people off the streets. I don't know, to be honest, the details of it, but it seems like the way that we're addressing it right now as a country here in the United States isn't working. And I'm a big believer that business is the best way to solve the big problems in the world. So yeah, it's a natural thing for me to be interested in, something I've been interested in for years.
Yeah, a couple of stats here I found online. Wikipedia says there's 150 million homeless people worldwide. In the city of New York, there are, it was 57,000, over 57,000 homeless people in the city, just the city of New York. Now that city has 8.4 million people, so that amounts to a little bit less than 1%, but they're concentrated in specific areas. And I, in the research, I saw there's a lot of, competition around, you get people coming into homeless shelters in areas that they're not actually from. So there's kind of some controversy around, where should people be taken care of, things like that. But it's definitely a problem. There's people trying to address it, but a lot more could be done.
I think that
Yeah.
it's useful to think about also the individual here, because it's as you said, Ethan, you get inured to it, right? And even when you walk by someone on the street, oftentimes you've been trained to associate them with uh, they're going to spend the money on alcohol or something, or drugs, and there's something that they did to get in those positions. So turn away, don't treat them like a human being. There are tons of people out there who have become homeless, not out of some sort of moral failing or because they made bad life choices. There are tons of Americans who are living paycheck to paycheck, and
Right. Yeah,
especially
no, totally.
during a pandemic like this, it does not take much for someone to drop into homelessness. Also, I
Yeah.
was surprised
There's
at
a
how
movie I
many
saw.
actually school age kids are homeless. I don't have the number offhand, but that's really like picturing a kid, a 8-year-old, playing with the stick rather than being at school and having to
Right.
panhandle for food and money. It's heartbreaking.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw a movie some years ago that also really inspired me about this. I think his name is Neil Donald Walsh. He's the author of a book called Conversations with God. Are you guys familiar with him?
I've heard of
Is the
him. I
movie have the
haven't read
same
it.
name?
I forget what the movie's name is, but it's basically his life story. And what happens is that he ends up being homeless because of something, right? And it's like just this chain of events, and like he can't pay rent, and then he's all of a sudden on the street, and like he loses his job, and then the challenge, the difficulty of getting back into the labor force, right? Because like if you don't have clean clothes and a shower, and then like not shave, right? And you go into job interviews and it's a little like not the kind of thing that people are looking for necessarily. And then I think there's a moment where he actually managed to clean up and go to the job interview, and then they discover that he's homeless. And then like, so it's like basically, solving that problem, right? Giving people who want to get back into the the labor market, back to work, get back into normal life, giving them a path to doing so.
Why does this have to be? And I'm asking this to all of us. It seems to me like this would be a government program. The government should do a better job of this, and
So one of
it's a
the
bigger
ways
problem than any of us individually can face.
For me, I mean, just philosophically, like I don't see that the government is very competent at very many things. So I wouldn't I don't tend to rely on the government to solve problems. I could see it's obviously something that I think we could get donations for, right? That could be run as a nonprofit, but also I've just seen too many nonprofits who take and some people are going to be super offended by this, but who take the nonprofit part too seriously, right? Where there's not that accountability and that discipline about using resources efficiently. So I'm a huge believer in business as a force for good. Doesn't mean we can't take donations from other people, but let's see if we can't make it actually profitable, right? There is a very, very healthy discipline that comes from that. So, let's not wait for the government to try to solve it when we can solve it ourselves.
I'm not an expert in nonprofit, but I've talked to some people who are deeply involved with nonprofits. There's a woman here in Chicago who used to work for Google. She's got a program called Brave Initiatives, helping young women get into technology. I learned an interesting thing from her. I think this is a true thing that's pretty consistent across not-for-profits. Just to give the people out there a sense of how the things go down. if you raise money as a donation, there are limitations on it, on how you spend it within a non-for-profit. But if you have some sort of a product that you sell, then there's less limitations on what you can do with that money. So there's actually, as she told me, people talk about, they think that if you run a nonprofit, you have to be poor, right? Or that you should not be making money, or you shouldn't pay yourself a good salary. And basically she said she doesn't believe that that's true, and that you just have to limit, you can't just take donations in and make that your salary. But if you can do something productive where people are going to pay for it, then there's less limitation. You can actually make an okay living if you have an interesting, an interesting design to the way the organization's run.
Right.
And another thing that I noticed recently is in looking up a recent story about this, at Thanksgiving time, there was an article in one of the major newspapers about the Coalition for the Homeless was doing an interesting fundraiser where you could buy these designer plates, and they would have these beautiful artworks on them. And, by getting them, it was like it is a Thanksgiving theme to that. You buy the plate, right. It's a beautiful artifact that you can have, but then there's money that goes to the Coalition for the Homeless. Exactly. So there's ways to go do fun, cool, creative things like that.
Right. I mean, there's also family members, right? Like that could be a source of paying for this. If you have a family member who is homeless and that they need help, but you're not equipped to necessarily help them or have time to do what's necessary, because it's like there's probably other issues that need to be solved there, right? Rather than just like the pure housing situation. And so maybe it makes sense that the family piles together and helps pay for this. So that could be another source of revenue.
I think that for this idea, we probably don't need to go in too much to the problem and the opportunity. People can look up the statistics. There we'll link to, there's a report that the U.S. government put out last year in September, the state of homelessness in America. So you'll be able to read that, 41 pages, all about it. But let's get into the how this would actually work, because of course there are homeless shelters out there and different services that exist. I'm trying to picture, trying to do some research on why those systems don't work right now. I think that'd be a good starting point to try and come up with an alternative. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, to be honest, I haven't done any research about what exists in this country. So I don't know. I just have done my thinking about what I would do.
When I looked into how does a homeless shelter make money, right? Or make a profit, if you want to even say that, it seems to be that a lot of the homeless shelters that are around are getting funding from the government. So I don't know that it's the government that's exactly doing it, but they're distributing money to homeless shelters. And that would be through the Housing and Urban Development Department of the United States. I don't know that is... that's clearly it's not a profit-driven model, put it that way. And
well, I'd actually jump in and counter that because, it's a little bit different. I came across the figure that a homeless person costs a city $80,000 per year. So that's per year per person. And you can make a business case to house them and provide some services and it would be at significantly less money than $80,000 a year. The median income in the United States is something like $50,000 a year. So it's kind of similar to the prison system where you're paying more for an outcome that is not better for that person.
Right.
To me, the key piece is to equip people to be fully participating members of society, right? And so there has to be there has to be personal responsibility, right? Like that's the only way that we ever achieve anything is we take personal responsibility for the things that we want in life. So that has to be something that's taught and ingrained. There has to be, just discipline, routines, like fixed things that you learn to just like make sure that you if you want a job, right, you got to show up on time, you got to do the work, that kind of stuff, some kind of skills training, right? So that it would be kind of, I'm thinking of it more like not as a place that you go get housing and like it's cheaper than, or that. It's a time limited program where at the end of it, you're fully equipped to go out and get a decent job and enter the American middle class. That would be the goal, right? Get a family, just be a fully functioning member of society. That would be the goal.
I'm picturing something closer to rehab as you're describing that.
Yeah.
I think that makes sense. You
There's
brought up. Go ahead.
No, you can go ahead. Go ahead, Chris.
I was going to get into some of the business model that you brought up here. I think is pretty interesting. Charging a percentage of earnings after people graduate, like programming boot camps.
Mm-hmm.
That is a very long view of how this could all work out, and of course, people at least have this perception, and it's probably true to some extent, that the majority of people who enter a homeless shelter are not going to make it out the other end, and they're not going to get high paying jobs that are going to provide some return on investment if you're taking some percentage of profits. So thinking through the math there, it doesn't seem like that would be enough to sustain a facility like this.
No, I mean, and no, but we don't need any one source of revenue to cover everything, right? And I also think so. I don't think this wouldn't be appropriate for everyone, right? Some people, there's just like it's too late. There's just too much stuff, too much trauma, too much, too many years of drug use or whatever. Like it's, for some people, it's just too late, right? So it's about finding the people that it would be applicable for, and that would we be able to help and rehabilitate and get out on the other side. Another example that comes to mind for me was I have a mentor, Dan Martell. He does a coaching program for SaaS companies called SaaS Academy. We're a member of that. When he was a young man, he was in trouble with police and drugs and all kinds of trouble. And I think he ended up like being stopped by the cops with a gun and like was big trouble. He ends up in an institution called Portage, which is kind of a rehabilitation institution for young kids like himself. And he's out now today, very, very successful entrepreneur and investor, making millions and millions. And so he keeps, I think he donates to this place, right? So to the extent that we're able to, like, it doesn't have to be, and we don't have to make money on people on every single one, but maybe some of these people that come out actually end up being very successful and become part of an alumni. Another thing that he does is for everyone who's at Portage, he's like, hey, if you stay sober for a year and then you want to start a business, I'll be your mentor for free, right? People normally pay him $24,000 a year and up. And he's like, I'll mentor you for free. You have to stay clean. You have to do the work, but I'll do that, right? So creating networks like that of people who actually made it through it or who can relate to it for some reason and they want to contribute to this, I think could be super powerful.
That brings up,
we can get people jobs too from people, just like you want to buy that license plate that you mentioned, Ethan, right? Like, hey, there are companies that will hire these people because, hey, it's a way that we can contribute and they're contributing to us. So
there's an interesting.
It was a dinner plate, by the way.
Oh, right. Sorry.
I was wondering why you wanted to
whatever it is. Yeah, some kind of plate. Yeah, license plate wouldn't make sense. I don't know either. Yeah.
Yeah, there's an interesting tension between this being a business and a philanthropy that I think make it a little bit hard for people to categorize in their mind. And that's not me just speculating. I listened to an episode of Gimlet's, I think it's their version of Shark Tank. I forget what the pitch is, the name of the podcast. And someone on there brought up an idea, which I will share with you guys, for an idea to solve homelessness. And one of the challenges that they got back from the panel was they didn't feel good about investing in this company from their venture capital arm, but they also, it was positioned as a for-profit business, so they also couldn't justify donating the money to the organization. So that's something that I want to come back to, but I do want to talk a little bit more about this competitor. It exists in the marketplace right now in Seattle, a company called Samaritan, and I'll just outline how it works here. They have provided homeless people with beacons. And I think that these are RFID type beacons. And people in Seattle can download the app, Samaritan. And as you walk by, if you're close to a homeless person, your phone gives you a notification and you can read the homeless person's background. It humanizes them. You hear how they got there, you hear what they're looking for money for, and there's no cash involved. So if you wanted to contribute to that person, then they get those funds stored in a separate account, which is managed by a licensed person who can be responsible for that. They have to check in with that person at least once a month. They can use those funds for groceries and medical expenses and maybe security deposits for rent. It's really interesting and comprehensive, seemingly well thought out solution that's out there, and that's also in the for-profit space. But as I said, the challenge that they're running into is how do they position themselves to either get investors from a for-profit side or get donations, and they have not figured that out.
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah, it's interesting.
I definitely don't think this is like a unicorn tech startup kind of investment play, right? I don't see that. It's more of a do good, and the profits is not. The way I think of it is, I saw a quote from John Mackey, the Whole Foods CEO. It's like, a business shouldn't exist to make a profit. A business is here to fulfill some kind of mission. And in the process of doing that, we need to make a profit, just because that's how we are sustainable. But it's not the goal of the business to make a profit. So in the same way here, the goal of the business isn't to make a profit, although if we do, that's great, right? But the goal is to fulfill the mission, and the profit motivate is just what I found is, and I mean, what we've all found, right, is that the profit motive is what incentivizes people to be innovative and be creative and be conscious about how they use their resources. It forces a certain discipline. Like this year, I've just been through a situation where we wasted a lot of money because we just had too much money. We had money to waste. If we didn't have that money to waste, we wouldn't have wasted all that money, right? And so there's a lot to be gained from having that constraint on the business, I feel like.
Yeah, it's more about sustainability, right, than profit.
Yeah,
I think it's so that I'm thinking of an example of another organization out there who is in this gray space of you're trying to get a return versus you're making a pure donation, and it's a little closer to the donation side, but it's Kiva, and you can it's micro lending platform that you can donate some amount of money to, as little as $25, and they will allocate it to someone who can use it to build a business in whatever fashion they best see fit. And then 97% of the time you get that money back. But that is this example of it's in between the two spaces. So I still think that there's something there. There's some impediment to people not either with their I need to make money hat on, or I need to do social good hat. And if I were to try and help people out, it's like, I should just donate that money as opposed to putting it in Kiva. Do you guys feel similarly?
Yeah, I agree that to me, it sounds like a not-for-profit model is the best model here, because it doesn't restrict people who care and want to be a part of it from making contributions of large financial sums, because if they make large contribution of a financial sum to a for-profit company, they're usually typically thinking, I got to get a return on that, or that's the idea, and it's going to be able to come back to my pocketbook 5%, 10%, 100%, 5,000%. That's what investors are thinking about when they're investing in companies. I believe, maybe there's people who just want to do good in the world from their investments, but I think it's hard to maintain that, right? It's hard to be sustainable with that model. So I would want to go non-for-profit, and that way you can recruit the larger amounts of funds from people. They don't have to think that they have to have a return on it personally. And what's interesting as I looked up on this, we all hear these stories are common. You talked about, no, they're not common, but I think they're powerful stories. So they're told more often. Dan Martell, came from a difficult situation. Somebody like Jim Carrey, he was living in his car and living in a tent in his sister's backyard at some point. Yeah, singer Jewel, she was homeless for a while. And by homeless, we mean they just don't have a place to go. They don't have a home and they can't afford it. So those type of people, they have a unique insight into it. The average person who hasn't faced homelessness, they see a homeless person, they're like, how did that happen? How did that happen? I can't even imagine helping this person. Oh, let me just here, get a job, put on a suit like I did. And it doesn't work because they don't quite get what it's like to be in that place. But you do have this unique situation where you have extremely successful people who came all the way from that point. They have a lot of empathy, a lot of ideas, and a lot of ways that they want to interject how they can help. And why not give them an avenue where they can just give, right? Give money and give their participation.
Yeah. So why don't we, I still feel strongly about the business, the profit motive, but regardless, like we can talk about how to actually go about
I think that makes
building
sense.
the business and what the steps are. Because I agree. Like the first step that I would do is like go talk to as many homeless people as I possibly can and try to figure out like how do they end up where they are. And that's another huge benefit is like, really learning about what happened, what are these backgrounds, so that we can trace the problem even further back and start to address some of those failings, right? But yeah, and identify people that we can help and then put together a curriculum for them. That would basically be where I would start.
Yeah,
And
I think that would give
what would that actually cost? How many? Like I would do a pilot program with the first like 5 or 10, right? And just find whatever funding we could find for that. So I mean, when you start a business, you don't know anything, right? You have to figure it all out. You have some ideas, but 90% of them are going to turn out to be wrong.
I think I would start by calling the founder of Samaritan. They've got a number on the website. It doesn't strike me as them having a big team. He's been grappling with this problem for years. And the impression that I had, at least, was that he was pretty forthcoming with information and would want other people working on this. There can't be enough people. It's unlikely that there would be too many people competing in this space that you are going to drown in competition. So
for sure.
If you can get some insights from him and
it's a good idea.
Yeah, jumpstart this, that would work.
And you mentioned before, like the existing homeless shelters that are getting government funding, right? It seems like that would be relevant to talk to some of them as well.
Yeah, find out what their situations are. I have a couple of homeless stories that come to mind where I might have had a personal experience. One was a student that was a TA for me when I was teaching statistics at the university at Hunter College. And what's interesting about his situation, perfect candidate for sort of rehabilitation. And was completely unaware he was homeless, he had a home at the point that I knew him, but he was still facing difficult situations. He wasn't turning in some projects that I needed to. I was like, hey, what's going on? He's like, my mom's sick. I was like, do you have family that's going to help you? He's like, no, I don't have family that's going to help you. All of a sudden I found out he's this, basically like a genius kid who wrote a book already. And, he was homeless at one point. And then I have another story of just helping some people who are looking for some food, something to eat in the train station one time. And it was an older woman and her granddaughter. And, I think it was, what kind of food do you want? And they picked the most unhealthy food in the food court, which, I just go ahead and get them the food that they're going to eat. But it's like, there's a lot, I realize there's a lot to break through here. You eat food that's not good for you. It's not going to help. Her granddaughter was diabetic. So, and she was eating, got a soda, right? And these things are not going to help her development, help her brain. What I think though is interesting is to find families that are homeless and find those families that have a kid that's probably putting in overtime trying to help their family anyways. And that's a lever, right? Where you have someone who's not so steeped in difficult scenarios and has the malleability in their mind to to get somewhere and maybe help their family out because they have an insider perspective. It might be an interesting place to start.
Yeah. 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 And like, I mean, diet and exercise has to be part of such a program, such a curriculum, right?
The other thing that came to mind as Calvin, you were bringing up the idea of talking to homeless people. I think that talking to social workers would be very helpful too, because they've had years of experience talking to homeless, and you can get that information distilled from them.
Yeah. And it's probably, I think that it is like catching people as early as possible, right? Like the further down the rabbit hole you go, it's probably going to be harder and harder. And I think these days, from what I've been able to gather, it's not as much a homelessness problem as it's a drug problem, right? I haven't seen data on this, but I think just from people I've seen, it seems like a lot of homeless people are on drugs. And so that's a whole other can of worms, right? To unpack.
Yeah. And I think that one would be harder to start with, of course, if you're trying to niche into the business with the easiest candidates. You certainly wouldn't want to, you'd want to be able to help those people eventually, but it's just, much.
And in order for this to work, you have to stay clean, like no alcohol, no drugs, no nothing, right? Like, and like you're immediately out if you fail, like, or maybe there's 3 strikes or whatever, but it has to be, that's a bare minimum here.
So we often talk about, in terms of starting a business, when would you give up, right? When would you say, oh, okay, I'm going to throw in the towel on this? I'm trying to think of metrics for this particular project where you might say, okay, it felt like a good idea, but I've gone far enough and maybe I just don't have any innovations in this space.
Yeah.
Maybe I would work on it for a certain amount of time. Yeah.
The way I think of it is I've read an essay by Paul Graham years ago, over a decade ago, that really influenced me, which the title was "No Startup Ever Died Mid-Keystroke." Key point being, these are tech startups that he invests in. Point being, as long as you're still coding, as long as you're still typing, as long as you're still working on it, startup hasn't died. You may have run out of money. Your investors have given up on you. Everybody, all your mates have left. Your co-founders have left. But as long as you're still working on it, the startup's not dead, right? And for me, what that means is also, if you're working on something that you believe is a key part of your life purpose, then you're going to keep working on it. And if you don't feel like your startup, your business is part of your life purpose, what the hell are you doing? So that's sort of my take on it. And so for me, it would be, this problem is big enough that if I commit to contributing to solving it, then I'm going to stick with it till I figure it the hell out. And that doesn't mean I can't solve all of the homeless problem again, right? Because my goal is to get people out on the other side, and not everybody is going to be sort of candidates for that. But and even everybody who are, I wouldn't be able to address, right? But I would keep going at it. And this is the kind of business where I would open source everything that we do and be completely transparent and share SOPs and like everything that we do about it, right? And hope that other people start other organizations and compete with us. That would be great.
What comes to mind for me is this. I don't think that this would be an idea for a beginning entrepreneur. It's very simple sounding, but the customer base, so-called customer base, is as challenging as you can imagine, right? They're disconnected all over the place. A lot of reasons that it would be difficult to be able to predict success, and it's so much reliant on human emotion and psychology, and all sorts of things that you can't control. That it seems like it might be someone like you who, after starting a super successful company and maybe you decide to sell Simplero at some point, and you have the experience and the perspective to be able to jump into a calling like this, because you wouldn't be going into it for the money at that point.
Right. Yeah. Not going to sell Simplero, but yes.
Yeah. Do you think that's true? Do you think that that it takes an established entrepreneur to be able to do this?
I don't think that it does. But I can see why you're thinking that. Like I can see the logic. I think that it could be relevant for a seasoned entrepreneur, but I also think it could be something that like a young person with passion, um, you know, a stronger passion than profit motive, and who's up for a challenge would throw themselves into, right? Um, yeah.
I'm also I'm thinking of Zach Babcock, who came on our show, who's a ex-convict who, you know, has built he's built podcasting business, and embraced, you know, his past as part of his story, when he initially thought it was you know, something that would be um, difficult for him to get past. And he talked about starting an organization that would help prisoners when they get out of prison doing
Right.
rehabilitation. And I think something similar you can think of here too, in terms of when are you going to stop, is, and how big is it going to be? It can be a small thing too. It can be a thing where it's like a very tight knit group of people who were homeless and have become a community for each other and are really all dedicated to, you know, reaching a certain level, you know. And I think that that could be not only more manageable, but and you could screen and you could filter much more easily, but it might be really you could have a level of engagement and excitement around it, being able to pay attention to the individual stories of the people that are part of it. So that's another way that you could address that.
You know,
Yeah, I
that's
like that a
interesting
lot.
because I was unconsciously falling into the trap of you have to solve the entire problem or don't go
Right.
after it at all. And
Yeah.
you can't solve the entire problem. Even if you were to try and you're not going to eliminate homelessness for, I think you said 150 million people worldwide. That's
Right.
just,
No.
you're not
Yeah.
going to do that as an
There's a
individual.
great book that I was reading recently. It's called Designing Your Work Life, and it's written by a couple of folks that teach at Stanford D School, which is the design school. And they've written two books: Designing Your Life, Designing Your Work Life. I forget the exact parameters, but they talk about how you want to decide how much is impact a factor in what you do, because it could be that the meaning is more important than the impact, right? So some people, they want to help millions of people. Some people, they want to help 3 people, but they really want to feel that they're having a direct impact. And
Mhm.
so that's something really seriously to think about. It doesn't have to be one or the other, you know,
Yeah.
or you might want to choose, you know, what you
Yeah.
focus on.
I mean, with Simplero, we have a lot of customers who are like have no ambition to create like the next Facebook or like some big thing, but they want to have a business that they can support their family and they can support their tribe, right? Their customers, their clients, and whatever it is that you that's perfectly adequate. I think this is something that could be bigger, but it could also be like a franchise model, right? So that the franchisee, their ambition is just to do something good for their neighborhood in a way that actually they can make a living out of, and you know, everybody profits.
One
I'm
thing
avoiding talking because I have a crying 3-year-old in the
no, I figured
Yeah.
that.
You didn't notice.
Yeah.
I did notice.
Calvin, we could have asked this at the top of the hour here, but um, and we did to some extent. There's so many ideas that you could have brought to us. Of course, I'm sure you've probably got hundreds or at least dozens that you could share, and you chose this one to bring out. Uh, why?
Because it's one I've thought a fair bit about, but not actually. I'm not doing anything about it, so it seemed to fit the bill. And it's, I mean, it's something that, you know, um, every time I walk past homeless people, it's something that I'm thinking about, right? That I'm reminded, like, just noticing, studying, and just thinking like, hey, what would I do, right? Because, you know, whether you give money or you don't give money, it doesn't actually solve anything. So what would solve this or move towards a solution?
I'm going to tread into dangerous territory here. I would venture that you and I have different political beliefs,
Mhm.
and which is, you know, they're completely fine, of course, but I am trying to. I would love to hear more about how just like how that lives in your head, because to me, I just cannot imagine someone with, the other teams of political beliefs bringing this idea to our show.
Right. What team am I on and what team are you on?
I think to make it clear, let's make it clear to the conversation. I think in doing research, he may have seen that you had been an advocate of the Trump administration, maybe even still, fighting to keep Trump in the office, versus someone like Chris, who's, on the opposite side of the aisle in terms of who they're voting for.
Right.
So, and I think it's interesting the way you phrase the question, Chris, because you think maybe you have different political beliefs, and sometimes maybe not. Like, you might vote for different people and have similar political beliefs, which is interesting. I know Calvin's interested in uniting, right, across domains between blue and red. But I think that's where that question comes from. I think it comes to the question of like, wait, you might have voted for, even though you can't vote in the US, you might have voted for that guy that I didn't, but you have this compassionate idea that I really think is interesting. You bring that to the table. How does that work? Is that a good rephrase, Chris?
Yeah, I think that it's me coming in humbly saying like, I want to learn more about the other side, so to speak, right? The Trump supporters.
Totally get it. So I mean, for my entire adult life, living in America and being oriented towards America, I always considered myself a Democrat. That was just, all my friends were, and that was just seemed to be the thing. And then it's like 3 years ago, I started to really pay attention and do research and study. And I, read somewhere like 100 different books on all kinds of political things and started, videos and YouTubes and interviews and all that stuff. And what I found was that while the goals are actually the same, what I found was the policies of the Democrat Party and the political left don't work, right? They actually make the very problems that they intend to solve worse, whether that's by design or just because they don't know how the world works. I don't know, but that seems to be the case. And so that's why I drifted conservative. And I actually think if you look at Trump, I don't want to make this about Trump, but if you look at Trump policy-wise, he's done a lot of policies that actually have worked and have worked really well. So that's why. And so, for me, whether I saw myself as a Democrat, I don't see myself as a Republican now, because I think all of our politicians I don't think any of them are on our side as people. I think they're on their own side. They're basically on the, whoever their donors are, and they talk a good game, but they don't actually do much. I mean, look at what's happened to the American middle class over the past 40, 50 years. I don't think they've done anything good for us. So it's more of a conservative, policies of what actually works. So for me, it's like, what the outcome, the goals that I want to solve are the same, right? And that was the big realization I had, is like, hey, like whether you're on the left or the right, our goals are actually the same. We just don't agree on how to get there. So if we can stop focusing on, I want this, and I want Medicare for all, or I want private or whatever, and stop having that argument and stop having the argument about like, hey, what do we want? We want people to be healthy, happy, prosperous, safe, thriving economy, healthy planet. All right, what are the things that are going to get us there? And then test them and see what works, right? And if they work, let's do more of it. If they don't work, let's do less of it. And so it's forcing an honesty in politics as well. That's what I would love to see also. And so same thing here. Let's test and see what works. If it brings people out of homelessness, great. If it keeps people staying stuck in homelessness, not great.
It's interesting. I was just listening to Kanye West. Not that he has to be the expert on anything, but on the Joe Rogan podcast, and he was talking about his thoughts on the way that racism gets handled, and he was saying that the kind of political correctness around it like puts a face on things and makes people feel good about what they're doing for racism, but that he personally, as a person of color, felt like it actually didn't work, right? That people were not actually handling issues in a way that he felt was productive. I thought that was interesting, and it reminds me of what you're talking about. It's like, okay, so we've all decided to be political correct around this, and the goal is to, help people feel more comfortable and become more successful. Is that working? Yeah.
Yeah. And I asked this, I think one of the biggest problems in politics, probably worldwide right now, is that the people with rational or moderate or whatever, but the people willing to at least work with the other side are the ones least likely to talk about politics in general. The people who are most empowered or feel most confident in talking about politics are the ones who have the most extreme views and aren't going to listen to anything that you say. So I think that, with this election that we've just had, and there's still a lot of rebuilding that needs to happen. And the only way that it happens is with people reaching across the aisle figuratively and sharing their opinions and coming to that point of agreement of, hey, what are we trying to solve here? We're both trying to figure this out. We may disagree on the means, but yeah, let's have a conversation about it. So thank you for sharing that. Wanted to point out to just call out that one of your goals that's in your Twitter headline there, as well as you want to be a special advisor to the President of the United States on conscious nation building. And you're at least a step of the way there, because you're followed by Barack Obama on your Twitter feed. I don't know if you know that.
I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
We don't interact much, but
he gives you a retweet every now and then.
Barry and me, right? We go way back.
Yeah, very cool.
That's pretty
Calvin,
cool. That's pretty cool.
Appreciated having you on the show here. Where can people go to learn more about Simplero?
Go to simplero.com. It's simpler. I like to say it's the simpler way to business orgasm, because it just makes it so fun to do business.
Nice.
Awesome.
Oh man, I can't remember the last time I had a business orgasm.
Right. Yeah, you need to use more Simplero in your business.
Great. Well, to the listener out there,
for those of you that we've been ignoring,
Ethan's been
entire
calling
episode.
Me.
I mean, those of you. I mean, you. Hey, you there. You have to be like very in their ear.
No, Ethan's coaching me on this. Yeah.
Hi there. Hello. Thank you for listening.
I don't know if that works for me, but I'll try it. For you listening, let us know what you think about this episode. Email us at update@runwithit.fm. Like, retweet, all that stuff. Leave us a review on iTunes. As Calvin said, only if it's 5 stars. No, I mean, we'll accept the lesser feedback if it's real, authentic. We want to hear what you're thinking about it.
By email
would work. Okay. Yeah. And until next time, to the listener, we will catch up with you next Thursday. Thanks for tuning in.
Awesome.
Thank you, guys.
All right. I'll cut us offline here real quick.
Okay. I'm uploading the audio on
Zencaster is done uploading, it says.